Okay, so Riaan, I'm so excited to have you on. I know you were on Billy's last podcast, Playing with Fire. So everybody, if you love this episode, and I know you will, you got to go back and listen to that. So we're going to jump right in because I had so many questions as I was listening to that podcast. So in your last interview, you shared some really heartbreaking realities, about ritual abuse, the use of stillborn infants, and even the sexual abuse of minors in satanic settings. Obviously, that happens in non-satanic settings as well. But toward the end of that section, you mentioned something that really struck me, that children, sometimes are born into generational Satanism.
Correct.
And so that's when, for the listeners, that's when their parents are Satanists and these children can be experiencing something so deep and so disturbing that it's almost a whole other interview, is what you said. So I was like, what does that mean? So I'd really like to kind of open with that. No pressure, but all the pressure.
Sure.
And I just want you to share more about what happens to these children, how they're impacted spiritually, emotionally, maybe even generationally. So jumping right in.
Sure. So as you say, by definition, generational Satanism is when a child is born into a family. It's not necessarily always the parents, but for most part it is, where both or one parent is already a Satanist. And then the children are exposed to all sorts of things, like ritual and observing high days and coven meetings and things like that. And then also, for the most part, those children are dedicated to Satanism
Right.
with various different rituals. So the difference between generational Satanism and, let's say, somebody that gets initiated into Satanism as an adult by choice is completely different experience. And in our ministry at the moment, we work with both types of, if you want to call it, satanic exposure. So
Sure.
The one being generational Satanism. Now, with generational Satanism, it comes with a complete unique set of things that needs to be addressed. For instance, many of those people as adults have DID, or dissociative personality disorder is the old term that most people understand about that. So it's almost like parts of them split off to not deal with trauma. There is, for instance, a ritual that is very unique to generational Satanists or those children, where it's called a rebirthing ritual. So the child is placed, happens before the age of 5 usually, where the child is placed in the cavity of a dead animal, of a deceased animal, and is left there for 2 to 3 days. And then a person that would visually represent Jesus as close as possible would come and rescue that child out of the cavity, but then also abuse the child so that the child starts having negative associations with Jesus Christ. So that's also a type of programming that happens. And programming, as probably most of you know, in satanic ritual abuse and also in satanic rituals that involves minors, is really rewiring the brain, the human brain, to make certain associations. So those are the type of things that children that are born into those families are exposed to, as well as obviously abuse and them witnessing the sacrifice of their own animals and things like that. So like I said, it is a unique different experience as opposed to people that as an adult chooses to be initiated into Satanism.
Yeah. I have a quick follow-up question. Wait,
go ahead, Jen. Go ahead. Jen's got a million questions. You go.
I do have so many questions because I'm working with someone who came out of a Masonic situation, and it's very similar.
Yes.
I mean, like, it's unbelievable to me. We're working on deliverance. It's been like a whole process. And so the DID thing is interesting to me because a couple of people have asked, like, is this going on? And I'm like, I don't think so. But if you're dealing with somebody who has DID and they're going through deliverance, and if you don't know the answer, I feel like you're going to know the answer to this question. So if you don't, there's no pressure. It's something I'm curious about. how do you deal with the DID? Like, do you have to reintroduce each kind of personality to Jesus? Like, is it one fell swoop? I mean, is it different every time? You know, like.
No, I wouldn't say you have to introduce each personality to Jesus, but there's always a control or a main person, which is the closest to the true person. That is the person who needs deliverance. So it is usually dealing with trauma that the person or the control, if you want to refer to it as that, don't really want to deal with. So to address those things. But I mean, nothing is impossible with Christ, as I've witnessed. And DID is a very specialized field. So myself, I do not specialize in that. My ministry partner, she specializes in DID, and she also comes from a background of generational Satanism.
Wow.
So, yeah, and she also does training for counselors who want to help and assist with DID cases and people when it comes to especially survivors of the occult and Satanism.
You know, one of the things I just want to ask about on this, and Jen, feel free to dive back in on that, but I don't want to miss this because it's really important. This conversation about Satanism, I don't know if it's the same there as it is here, but there's been this attempt, and we talked about this a little bit last time, to sort of diminish, to sort of claim this isn't happening. The satanic panic, it was all fake. And so any claim that satanic ritual abuse is still going on gets sort of pushed to the side in the media. There have been documentaries and books, and we all know that. But my question to you is, how often when you were in Satanism, were you around the things you just described, or were you aware of them, that they were happening? Okay.
So myself, my personal, and I'm very willing to speak about that today or recently, I myself have been a perpetrator with satanic ritual abuse. Myself, also, when I was a spokesperson for the South African Satanic Church, we used to say things like, that doesn't happen. We do not practice those things, because obviously there's an agenda, and there's also the whitewashing of Satanism. But I have evidence, obviously photographic and video evidence of satanic ritual abuse sessions, not necessarily with people that are minors, but that definitely happens. And I have witnessed as well with my own eyes the abuse, especially in terms of inflicting pain and getting involving blood rituals with children, where I've actually personally witnessed it. So the only thing that I have not witnessed with my own eyes was human sacrifice. So that I've heard of, and I've met people who have participated in that. But in terms of animal sacrifice and satanic ritual abuse and the abuse of minors, I've personally witnessed that with my own eyes. And like I said, in terms of the satanic ritual abuse, when I was involved in Satanism, that is something that I did, like I was very involved in that at the time. Yet at the same time, as the spokesperson for the South African Satanic Church, and I know this is the same with spokespeople of other satanic organizations, it is very important for them to say that these things do not happen. Yeah.
Wow. So I want to, there's so many things I want to ask you. Obviously, I just want to quickly, I want to jump into your transformation and your encounter with Jesus. But before I do that, last thing I want to say, just for anybody that's listening, is obviously for parents who have done the unthinkable, they've brought their children into satanic rituals. Is there still hope for them?
Absolutely. Right. Of course. And I have seen in the last 2 to 3 years where many of those Satanists, well, I'm saying many, so I've witnessed at least up to 42 people who was deeply involved in Satanism, up to the level of priest and high priest level, being completely redeemed and saved by Christ. So it is definitely possible, yes. I am not saying that is the majority of Satanists. I will be lying if I say that. But I have seen Jesus literally free people and God restoring people and families. That I have also witnessed.
So incredible. So speaking on that, you said it wasn't a sermon, it wasn't a service or even deliverance that drew you. It was Jesus himself. And you had a direct encounter with him that changed everything for you. Can you kind of walk us through that moment and what specifically shifted your heart in those few minutes when you encountered Jesus?
Sure. So I think important to mention as well is that 10 days prior to my encounter with Christ, I met a person, a lady at a radio station who hugged me, who embraced me, and she literally snuck in like from the side and came and gave me a hug after I said on the radio station that I don't actually believe in Christ, and I don't believe that Jesus ever existed as a person or as the Son of God on this earth. I remember I specifically said something like Jesus is like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. Those were my words. Yet still this lady came and she hugged me. And I only found out 1 or 2 days later that she's actually a Christian. So that, and I'll tell you why that's important. So that stuck with me quite a lot because I wasn't used to Christians actually showing me any love or acceptance or anything like that. So here I meet this Christian and completely unconditional, just loving, just embracing. So a few days after that, I was supposed to perform a ritual, a satanic ritual that was at that time decided around the world by 7 different satanic organizations to check in on whether the Antichrist has been born yet or not. So each satanic organization had to appoint a person to perform that ritual. So because of my background at the time, that was in the occult as a professional practitioner and somebody who actively practiced ritual even before I got involved in Satanism, they thought it a good idea to appoint me to do the ritual. So when I started preparing for the ritual, so there's 5 candles that you're supposed to light at points of a star when you do satanic rituals. This is like a standard thing. So when I got to lighting the second candle, the whole room where I was doing this suddenly lit up as if there was a spotlight shown into the room. So my initial thoughts actually was that I'm either being pranked or I'm being watched by someone. And as I turned around, he was there. Jesus was standing there. And again, I didn't know that this was Jesus. So I asked him, "Who are you?" And he said to me, "My name is Yeshua of Nazareth." And I said to him, "You'll have to prove it, because I don't believe it."
Right. You're like, I don't even believe in you. I don't even believe you existed. Like, as a person.
But you knew he was a spirit. You knew he was obviously not a person. Or like, what was your thought in that moment?
Yes, okay. I knew it wasn't a person, but also remember, in Satanism, there's a lot of involvement of invoking demons and working with demons. So demons always appear in a certain way to occultists and people practicing very light, actually, there's like a glow, lots of bells and whistles. Where there was nothing, there was no theatrics or anything. It was very simple, and that's why I asked him. So when I said to him, "You'll have to prove it," he flooded me with so much love. And because of that lady at the radio station, I recognized that love, because you see, she had Christ inside her.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So I immediately recognized it, like, this is real. And I remember I actually fell to my knees because I couldn't stay standing up. And as it said, every knee shall bow. Right. And it's definitely the truth. You can't contain yourself in that presence. And I don't remember whether this was like a minute or 2 minutes, but it was definitely not longer than that. But the whole world went quiet. And it was like somebody turned off the sound of the world. And I just sat on the floor in that quietness and that feeling of love. And at that time of my life, I actually thought I was happy. Like, if you would ask me that time, if you would ask me 3 years ago, are you happy? I would have said yes, because materially, I've got everything that I ever wanted, and I had all the drugs in the world, and I had motorbikes and cars, and I owned 2 homes at that time. So according to the world standard, I was definitely happy. I just didn't realize that I had a Christ-sized hole in my heart.
Yeah.